the Jazz Notes podcast. I'm Ben Anderson.
I'm Chandler Holt.
We are sitting very close to each other today. It is July 7th. Usually in our recording studio, there are 3 cameras. There's only 1 camera today, so we are sitting right next to each other to record this, which is actually how we did the draft recap.
Yes.
Because we were doing a Teams live or a Twitter live at the same time. So you can find us on Twitter at Ben's Hoops, at C Holt Sports. Read us at Blue Sky as well there. And KSL Sports is where you find all of our content. Or you can watch us on YouTube if you want to see how close we are sitting to each other and how Chandler has to sit artificially low because he's 5 inches taller than I am. So it looks funny. But appreciate everyone who tunes in as always. We will get to the weekly news, which was the big trade this morning. John Collins going to the Los Angeles Clippers. We'll look a little bit at the Summer League, and then we will wrap up the podcast with your mailbag questions, as always, like I said, at Ben's Hoops and at C Holt Sports. But yeah, that was the news this morning. Shams Charania of ESPN announced that the Utah Jazz are trading John Collins to the Los Angeles Clippers for what will essentially be Kyle Anderson, Kevin Love, and a 2027 second-round pick. And Norman Powell will go from the Clippers to the Miami Heat. So the Jazz accomplished their goal, and I bet you this came together pretty quickly because I do not think that there was a trade waiting in the last couple of days. Since I've last talked to some people at the Jazz, it seemed like there was a thought that if they had to go into the season with John Collins, they would have. And because he kind of plays a position that was not overloaded with depth the way the guards were, and you had to get rid of Colin Sexton and Jordan Clarkson, they maybe didn't feel as pressured to trade John if they didn't find something back or was coming back and like they weren't going to pay to get off of him. And they don't. They actually get an asset back in a second-round pick, and then more importantly, and we'll talk about this because we've got questions about it, they can generate a massive trade player exception, TPE, as they call it, like $26.5 million.
Yeah.
And they can do that by taking Kevin Love and Kyle Anderson back into their mid-level exception cap space. So they use that exception to pay those guys' salaries, which is under the $14.9 million or whatever the mid-level is. And basically they trade John by himself for the $26.5 million trade exception, which then they could use this season if they want to.
Kind of interesting how, like you said, they were more or less had their hand forced to trade Colin Sexton, and they kind of showed they had to give up an asset in order to get him off. And then with the trade, they were sort of, like you said, maybe came together last minute. They were able to get an asset back, so that's why they ended up doing it. It's pretty obvious there was never really a market for either of these guys. I would assume even going back to last year and even last offseason. But now the sort of interesting question is what happens with Kevin Love and Kyle Anderson. Do they keep them and use that $26.5 million, like you said? Or maybe they buy them out. Something else like that could be on the table.
I would bet Kevin Love gets bought out.
Okay.
Kyle Anderson has 2 years and $19 million left. It's a lot to pay a guy.
Yes.
And, actually it doesn't hurt to have Kyle Anderson on this roster, as we saw, and we can transition into the Summer League debuts that we saw on Saturday night. The Jazz are really thin at guard. And I know the idea of getting off Colin Sexton and Jordan Clarkson was to let Isaiah Collier and Walt Clayton and maybe even most importantly Keontae George play a lot in the backcourt at point guard. They even struggled to just like generate their offense on Saturday night. So having a guy like Kyle Anderson, who's not a pure point guard, but can do a little bit of the Joe Ingles, like can play the 1, the 2, the 3. He can even play the 4 a little bit now at this point in his career. Like if he's on the roster, he just kind of can help you get into your stuff.
Yes.
And I think there is value there if, there are stretches of the season where you're just like, oh man, Isaiah has played 30 minutes 5 nights in a row and is exhausted, and Keontae's out with an injury, and Walt Clayton Jr.'s just hit the rookie wall and is not ready to play. Kyle Anderson can take some of that over, or Svi can take some of that over. So I think that's where those guys have a little bit of value for the Jazz if they are on the roster.
And also worth adding 2027 second rounder. So now this next draft year after.
Which the Jazz had lost 4 second rounders in the last week, right?
Yeah.
They traded 1 to get off of Colin Sexton, and then they traded 3 in the deal to move up from 21 to 18 to draft Walt Clayton.
Yeah.
So they needed to get some of those back because they were pretty depleted there. And I'll have to update our Utah Jazz draft asset page. I haven't done that yet since the draft, so I'll have to go back and do that. And you can see all the different options the Jazz still have with their draft picks going forward because they still have a lot. Have a lot of draft picks in their quiver.
I'm sure we have a lot of mailbag questions about the Collins trade, so we'll talk more about it then.
Yep.
But let's transition into NBA Summer League, Salt Lake City Summer League. The Jazz played their first game against the 76ers, 93-89 win. It was basically, especially on national scale at least, the VJ Edgecombe versus Ace Bailey game.
Yeah.
Ace Bailey definitely was not the better of the two, at least in that one game.
No, I thought VJ looked excellent.
He looked awesome. He did take 27 shots, 13 for 27.
Yeah.
But he had 28 points, 10 rebounds, 4 assists. Ace Bailey ended up with 8 points, 7 rebounds, shot 3 for 13. I think he had a stretch where he missed like 7 shots in a row in the second half. But I would say 7 rebounds, that was one of the best parts of the game for him. Like he was getting down there a lot.
I don't think he made a basket in the second half. I think all of his 3 makes came in the first half.
Yeah, and then he got a free throw like the very end of the game.
Yeah. So, VJ looked good. He had the ball in his hands the whole game.
Oh, yeah.
He was playing point guard. He was initiating. He was able to do basically everything, and they gave him a green light to do everything, and he looked exceptional and good for him. He's the 3rd overall pick. He should look good. He's also a year older than Ace Bailey, which I think is something we should touch on a little bit. Now, I have said throughout the draft process, and I won't back off of it, is that I think we overrate that a little bit. But when you actually do talk about a player's like physical development, like he is just a year older. He's a year stronger. He's just a year more, further in his maturity physically than Ace Bailey is. And that's going to be a big issue for Ace. Not issue, but, step for him is progressing into becoming an adult and a man. And that'll happen over the next couple of years because you remember Taylor Hendricks when he first showed up at the Jazz versus the Taylor Hendricks you see throwing out basketballs now at halftime. It's a different person. He's a grown man now. So Ace will get there.
Yes.
I thought what you saw from Ace was actually like really revealing on how the team should use him, which his 3 baskets came on an offensive rebound. Actually, it came rebound, full court. Like he got the defensive rebound, went the length of the court, went to the basket for a layup, missed it, tapped it in, missed it, and then finally got the 3rd putback. Yeah. Went in. But he's going to have the ability to rebound and go, which I think is really valuable. He hit an a corner 3. Yeah. So he was playing off ball. He was just a wide open catch and shoot. And then his final make was kind of cutting across the middle of the floor, catches the ball, turns around, hits a mid-range jumper. Yep. It's like really pretty. He's taller than everybody. He can get that shot off whenever he wants. But all 3 of them came off ball.
Yes.
An offensive rebound. Technically, he created the offensive rebound, but an offensive rebound, a catch and shoot 3, and a, curl into the little stack screen to hit the little mid-range jumper. That's probably how you should use him.
Yeah,
Don't
absolutely.
ask Ace Bailey to go out there and create 27 shots like you just saw from VJ Edgecombe. His handle's not there. His strength's not there. His understanding of the defense probably isn't quite there yet. But I actually think he has a lot of value off ball, and I think that's how you bring him along slowly, which, by the way, is how the Spurs brought along Kawhi Leonard and how the Pacers brought along Paul George. And, let him find his spots. Let him find out where he's successful. Let him find out which shots go in and then build counters off of that, which is, okay, now they're closing out harder on him on his corner 3s, so then he attacks the rim and can make a play for himself or for others. Get the little mid-range curl, and when, again, they collapse on him, he kicks to the corner, kicks to the guy who's sitting in the dunker spot, or he puts the ball on the floor once and gets to the rim. I think you actually saw positives there, not necessarily negatives, though I understand people look at the 3 of 13 and say, like, oh, man, he's raw. It's like, yeah, he's extremely raw. He's by far the rawest player that was selected in the top 10, probably. Yeah. Certainly in the top 5.
Something that I liked, he missed his first few shot attempts, and then, like you said, takes it full court, gets downhill, and then eventually gets that tip to go. And then, like you said, 3 makes on 3 different levels for him. I think that's a good sign. Something we talked about was that took a lot of tough shots at Rutgers and didn't get to the rim maybe as much as he should have with his athleticism and all his tools. And it's like, I thought that the fact that, okay, I missed a few shots, let me go to the rim is a good sign for him, right? Like, he's not going to be a guy who just, I'm going to shoot a jump shot until I make one,
Right, exactly right. And one of the things Scott Morrison said after the game, the Jazz's Summer League coach, Scott Morrison, said they could probably do a better job of getting him involved.
Yes.
Which he did go long stretches where he was just standing in the corner and didn't touch the ball. So when he did get it, he did the classic Ace Bailey, I'm going to shoot over everyone who's standing in front of me. And they just didn't go in. And the weird thing is, again, they went in at Rutgers. Like, that was his most remarkable skill. We talked about it a lot during his, pre-draft preview that we did when we were talking about, hypothetically, if he landed in Utah. He takes crazy shots.
Yes.
They just went in at a crazy amount. They went in at a rate higher than I've ever seen players make them at that level. And he may have just had an off shooting night. So we will see tonight as they take on the Memphis Grizzlies.
In that game, though, Kyle Filipowski, 22 points.
Yes.
Bryce Sensabaugh, 19 points with 16 of them in the first half. Cody Williams had 14 points. And then he also added 5 rebounds, assist, steal, and a block. And then Walter Clayton had 9 points, 3 for 8 shooting, 6 assists, and a block as well. I thought Walt played awesome.
He's not a point guard.
Yes.
Even though he played a little bit of that. I think he only had 1 creation assist where he penetrated and kicked the ball to flip in the corner for a 3. But he's catching the ball. Isaiah Collier comes down, or whoever's playing point guard comes down, makes a play, pick and roll or whatever, kicks it to Walt. Walt catches the ball on the perimeter and then makes a read immediately off of it, right? Kicks to Cody in the corner for a 3 or flip for a 3 or whatever. He's making these connective assists, which actually are extraordinarily valuable.
Oh, yeah.
It's not Isaiah Collier on ball, let me just penetrate the defense, kick the ball out for an assist, which is valuable. It's kind of, simple function, simple action. But reading it as soon as you catch it and making a play off of that for others is connectivity that, I love that we saw from Con Knippel. Like, you talk about connective passing, connectors. Walt Clayton showed that off really well. So I thought that was a value for him that the Jazz really lacked last season and have lacked for a while. They are a terrible passing team, and Walt Clayton, Kyle Filipowski, and Isaiah Collier will help alleviate that. And I actually think, Cody's actually a pretty good connector as well. Yeah. Not a great one-on-one playmaker, but connector as well. So I think you're starting to see the pieces there. I actually think Taylor Hendricks is pretty good at it as well. He just obviously does it in a different spot on the floor. But Jazz will start to get some of that back, and I think that's going to be valuable for the team. So you're right. Walt Clayton was really good. 6 assists, 2 turnovers, 2 of 6 from the three-point line, including a clutch 3, which is what he's known for. He hit a big shot late in the fourth quarter. Isaiah Collier shooting not looking good. 1 of 7 from the floor, 0 of 3 from the three-point line. We'll see how he looks tonight.
One thing I want to say, and then we can go into a break and get into the mailbag. Do not take Summer League too seriously.
No, of course not.
I think the main point of Summer League for these young guys is to get out there and get into their team's offense for the first time. That is the main point of Summer League in my eyes. And what I'm about to say, I'm not going to say there isn't examples of players playing good in Summer League and then playing good in the NBA. And then there's, of course, cases of them being bad in Summer League and then not making it to the NBA. But Steph Curry shot 32% in his Summer League. Victor Wembanyama shot 2 for 13 in his first Summer League game. Yeah. And then Nikola Jokic averaged 8 points and 6 rebounds. And then on the other hand, Josh Selby was named co-MVP of the 2012 Summer League with Damian Lillard.
Yeah.
One of those players made it, one of them didn't.
One guy really went through, and one guy is not in the NBA very long. So, I've nothing to stress about tonight. In fact, or tomorrow or at any point. I think the Jazz are probably going to give Ace a game at some point where he takes 20 shots. They're just going to be like, Ace, we want to know what you have. Yeah. And actually, we're going to let you kind of initiate some offense and run some pick and roll. And, they also have some issues. Like, they just don't have a center on this team. And poor Kyle Filipowski was trying to guard Adem Bona, which is just like a terrible matchup for him. And you know what? To Kyle's credit, he won.
Oh, yeah.
He won that matchup. Adem Bona played very well, had 16 points on 8 of 11 shooting. Flip had 22 points on 8 of 11 shooting. And just you saw him go through the counters of this guy's stronger than I am and more athletic than I am and can finish over top of me. And defensively, I'm going to be toast. He was. But he said, okay, so how do I beat this guy? It's I can step out and shoot the 3. And if they come out and guard me, I can drive off the dribble and I can make plays for others. And he did those things. And it was really high level processing, I thought, from Flip. And he even talked about it after games. I had to think this game. I had to think through what they were showing me and how do I adjust, because he was terrible in the first half and was A+ in the second half. So more promising stuff from Flip, who I think is a very good player.
Yes. The one thing that I will add, if you're a second, third, or third-year player, you better look at least solid in Summer League.
You're in trouble if you're you don't belong on the court.
Yes.
And I thought both Bryce Sensabaugh and Flip were the Jazz's 2 best players.
Yeah, and Cody Williams, there were some rough shots out there, but he ended the game, like I said, 14 points, 5 for 12 shooting, 5 rebounds, assist, steal, block. So he contributed.
The thing I said about Cody, I thought we saw, which was he needs 80% more Ace Bailey, and Ace probably needs 20% more Cody. And we saw it. He was taking shots with guys in his face, and he just says, you know what? I am 6'7". I know I can shoot. I didn't shoot well my first year, but I shot well at Colorado. I know I can shoot. I know I can play. And I was glad he took some of those shots because he actually did shoot 2 of 6 from the three-point line and was excellent defensively. He was all over the floor. Watch him tonight. Jazz were running a lot of zone, but he was switching really good, passing guys off in the zone, recovering. When someone would make a mistake, he was recovering and going out and challenging shots. I thought Cody looked really, really good, actually. He's still really thin, and that's just going to be until he gets stronger and bigger. I think it's going to be hard for him. But I thought he played excellent. I was really impressed with Cody. So I'm excited to watch him again tonight because I'm curious to see what his development looks like. All right, let's take a break.
Yes.
We got more questions about the Summer League, Ace Bailey, etc. We will talk about those coming up next in the mailbag. Stick around, more Jazz Notes. Welcome back to the Jazz Notes podcast. Ben Anderson, Chandler Holt. All right, as always, we like to wrap up and really feature, the mailbag of the show or section of the show. We get a lot of questions on Twitter and Blue Sky, where I put out a prompt every Monday at about 11 o'clock. It was a little late today, but asking you for your Jazz and NBA questions, and then we respond to them on the show and write it up in an article as well. So we'll start quickly with Blue Sky. We'll go to a DM I got, and then we'll get to the Twitter questions. Darth Van Digo says, what's the likelihood that Lowry is traded by the trade deadline, and what could the return possibly look like? I don't think he'll get traded at the deadline.
I don't think so either.
Teams get better. Well, first of all, when you're talking about $40 million, which is what he makes, a lot of times those are multiplayer trades, and teams just carry 15 players on the roster. So if you're taking back, 2 for 1, you have to waive somebody else on the roster. It just kind of gets tricky when you're talking about $40 million, because generally there's 1 or 2 guys, unless it's just a straight 1 for 1, and that's hard to do at $40 million. So generally those happen in the offseason. So I would just say I don't think it happens midseason.
Yeah.
I think it's going to happen probably next offseason, but I don't think Lowry's going to be here for the long term, if I'm being totally honest with you, but I think he's here at least for the short term, which is probably at least the next 12 months. That would be my guess.
I agree.
And then what does it look like? It depends on what his value looks like when it comes back. If he rebuilds it this year and gets back up over 20 points a game and shoots better from the floor and better from the 3-point line, I think he could still get a huge return. And there were big players traded this offseason. Kevin Durant got a pretty good return, I thought, this offseason, this summer, for the Suns. So Lowry's not quite at that level, but there are big trades still happening in the NBA. So I think Lowry could still have some value there.
Yes.
All right. Next question on Blue Sky. Mac Basketball. Genius money-saving opportunity opening day trade today. He's talking about John Collins. Any chance to move the new vets for younger, undervalued prospects? Again, I think Kevin Love's going to get bought out, so I don't think you're going to move him. Kyle Anderson, probably not this year, but maybe next year with a $9 million expiring contract, maybe. But again, the Jazz couldn't move Colin Sexton at $18 million, who's a much better player than Kyle Anderson.
Yep.
And Jordan Clarkson for $13 million, who I don't know if Jordan's a lot better than Kyle, if he's better at all. Kyle's kind of the cerebral, do-it-all role player off the bench who playoff teams value, but Minnesota didn't value him enough to keep him. I mean, they couldn't really afford him. And then Golden State was happy to trade him in the Jimmy Butler deal.
Yes.
So, I don't think he has a ton of value left.
I think the more I think about it, I think Kyle Anderson would be a great fit as sort of a veteran. I'm not saying he won't see the floor, and he's definitely better than Patty Mills when he was here. But him being around for Ace Bailey, Cody Williams, maybe even Kyle Filipowski, I think will be huge.
Kyle?
Yeah. Kyle Anderson.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. No, and he should be able to. I mean, he's played point guard in his career. That's where he came coming out of UCLA. So teach Keontae George some tricks of the trade, then teach Ace Bailey some tricks. Because now he kind of plays that 2-3-4. He's just kind of a bigger guy, which is where Ace Bailey plays as well. So there's value if he is willing to embrace that mentorship role, which just kind of happens in the NBA. I think he can have some value with the team, and helps Will Hardy, etc. Just some things like that. And I bet you they cross paths because he started his career at San Antonio.
Yeah.
Right? He was drafted by the Spurs late in the first round. Am I right on that?
Yes, I think you are.
So I wonder if Will Hardy was already there. And Will, liked having Patty Mills when Patty was with the team to start the year last year. Kyle just may have come out before Will was there. But again, Will was there for 9 seasons and then moved over to the Celtics year. So he would have started 10 years ago now at this point, 11 years ago.
Kyle Anderson was the 30th pick in the 2014 draft of the Spurs.
When did he leave the Spurs?
He left the Spurs in 17-18.
Okay, so
18-19.
They absolutely crossed paths.
Yeah.
So he knows Kyle Anderson. So just gives Will a guy. I bet you Will signed off on this trade would be my guess. I have not asked him. All right, Jake the Lynx, quickly on this, says, what are the chances any of the rookies are starters on opening night? I think Ace will start.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I think this is about him getting out there and playing a lot. And I actually think there's a chance Walt Clayton. If Walt has a good summer league and shoots the ball better than Keontae and Isaiah, he could start. You may not want to just start the 2 rookies right away, especially if they're kind of both backcourt players, and that might be the issue. But Walt, if he can shoot better and starts to make some of those kind of point guard reads, I was talking about his connectivity. If he can make some more point guard reads, why not?
Yeah, and Keontae sort of shined in that off the bench role last year, so maybe that's just where the Jazz are permanently kind of slotting him. But then again, it also remains to be seen if maybe that's what Walt is going to be when he plays. So
look, Walt, if he can space the floor and hit threes off the pick and roll, which is again is the problem with the Jazz not having a good center. Yeah. Flip is a 4. I just think that's what he is in the NBA. I don't think he's a 5. But he's not even a great pick and roll big. He's more of a pick and pop guy or just a floor spacer, or in fact some inverted pick and roll stuff where he starts the action. I think Walt might look really good with Walker Kessler setting a screen for him and having a little bit of space and saying, like, okay, I'll just kill you. And then it's a really simple read. Like, if you collapse on me, I can make the pass to Walker. And if you give me space or you go under for some foolish reason, I'm just going to kill you on the pull-up. So that's where he has value that Isaiah Collier's not hitting those shots yet, and Keontae hasn't hit those shots yet either. So that's where Walt might step in and have a role.
All right, over to X now.
Yeah, quickly, got a DM from Dan on the DMs. It's USU the Right Blue. He says, what was Ace Bailey's play of the night? Talking about Saturday night in Ace Bailey's debut. I actually thought it was his rebound in the fourth quarter. Yeah. Off of, I think it was a missed free throw.
Yes.
It was the one time in the crowd, everyone went, oh. Like, I heard it, because we're sitting halfway up the lower bowl at the Huntsman Center. And Ace is tall out there. Like, he is thin still. He's pretty thin in his shoulders. He's got to put on 20 pounds.
Yeah.
But he is really tall at his position, and he's very athletic. And I think he was on the perimeter. I'd have to go back and watch it. He was, like, lined up outside the three-point line on the free throw and skies in and grabs a rebound and is, like, legitimately a head and shoulder higher than everybody else grabbing this rebound at a clutch moment, and then he gets fouled, and I think that's where he hits his one free throw late in the game. It's like, oh, that's a big player. That's a big person using physical tools that most players in the world, even at this level, do not have. And he's a good rebounder. Like, I know some people complained, like, oh, he was just grabbing rebounds at Rutgers because they were little and they're a bad team. It's like, no, I actually think he's a pretty good rebounder. And look, he does a little bit of the Angel Reese thing, which is like miss 3 layups and get all the rebounds. Yes. He does that, and that's why he got 7 rebounds in this game. But I think he is a good rebounder.
Yes.
And that rebound, it's like, and as he said after the game, which was great, I have it on my Twitter account, or I should say on my Instagram account. It's also at Ben's Hoops. I put it at KSL Sports as well. He talked about after the game, he talked about, he's like, rebounding wins games. And I think he's a good rebounder. And I think that can help you win games. Like, Carlos Boozer was a bad defensive player, but he averaged 12 rebounds a game. Like, ending possessions really helps, and he ends possessions, and Ace might be able to end defensive possessions because he rebounds well. And that just gives you an opportunity. Like we said, his first bucket came on rebounding and then running the court. But if you can just grab the ball late in games, get possession, that's very useful.
Yeah.
I thought that was his best play.
Far from his play of the night, but something that stuck out to me, I'm pretty sure he missed a catch and shoot 3 to start the game, and then his third shot was the missed layup that he eventually tapped back in. But his second shot, he was on the left wing, and he sort of like dribbled once forward and then did like the James Harden like double step back sort of back to the left wing and shot it. And when I saw that live, and I was just like, this dude has every single shot in his bag. Like yeah, he has every sort of fadeaway, step back, sidestep, everything. And I thought it was going in. That's the kind of, me watching Ace Bailey, every time he takes a shot, I'm like, oh, this is one of those shots that's going to go in.
Yeah, and eventually I think that's the goal, is that they will.
Yes.
And they did go in at a higher rate at Rutgers. Again, he had one
It was one game,
yeah. I wouldn't worry too much about it, even if it's the entire offseason and then the entire, first year.
Yep.
We may not see him hit a lot of shots early on, but I think he'll have some runs. Again, I watched I can't remember if it was the Northwestern game or the Penn State game or whatever. He misses his first 2 shots and then hit 13 in a row, and they're all just the craziest shots you've seen. He gets unbelievably hot, and that will happen at some point in this as well.
All right, over to Extra Replies now. First up from Grumman, Ace is slated to be the 4th highest paid player on the team in year 1, $9 million behind Lowry, Nurkic, and Kyle Anderson, barring other moves. Will he be the number 2 guy on offense right away?
No.
I
don't know who will be. John Collins' 19 points was tied with Lowry for the leader on the team. So I wouldn't be surprised if, Walker gets an increase there. I just don't think Taylor's going to be on the floor early enough. So, like, Keontae or Bryce might be the odds-on favorites.
I was going to say Keontae.
Again, I have been beating this drum for a while. Like, I said this after his rookie season. Like, there's a world in which Keontae George averages 20 points a game.
Yes.
And it may have kind of fallen backwards into it. But it's not like, I developed into 20-point per game scorer, but it's just like there's going to be 18 shots a game for Keontae.
Yeah.
Because Jordan's gone now. So he has to take some of those. And again, he has to take some like tough hero shots. It's just not super easy for the Jazz to score because they don't have a lot of guys who can create. And Keontae is one of the guys who can create a shot for himself. They just haven't gone in at a high enough level. But, if you were to pull up Anthony Simons' 3rd-year jump in the NBA, like I think he goes like 8 points, 9 points, 20 points. Like he is early, or maybe it was only like 15, but like his percentages really kind of finally flattened out his 3rd year, like became an somewhat efficient scorer. I could see that absolutely happening for Keontae and fully following the Anthony Simons developmental path. I think it could be extremely similar.
Keontae George went from 13 points in his rookie year to 16.8 last year. That's a 3.8 point jump. If he jumps 3.8 again, he's a 20-point scorer.
Yeah, which it's a lot.
Yeah,
3.8's a lot. But yeah, Anthony Simon's first year 3.8 points, second year 8.3 points. Okay, third year only 7.8, and then jumped up to 17. Like he had 10 points per game. I could see something very similar for Keontae. Again, I think Bryce is going to score a lot. We saw how good of a shooter he is. I think that's just what we're learning about Bryce, is that's who he is. He's an elite shooter.
Yeah.
And I don't know if he has a whole lot else to his game right now. Not really a lot of creation. But if he touches it, he should shoot. And he should get a lot of opportunities to shoot the ball.
And I will say, like averaging the second or third most points can be different from being the second or third option sometimes.
Good point.
Like I think Ace Bailey's going to come in and have a green light, like almost a full green light. Like to just take any shot that he thinks is a good shot for himself. And like I wouldn't be surprised if he's a top 4 scorer for the Jazz this year. That would not be surprising to me at all. But I also don't think he's going to come in and be like a Kyrie to Lowry's LeBron or something like that.
No. But he will have stretches where he's getting the second most shots on the game or on the team. I think in games. I think that's absolutely part of the projection.
Next up from Josh, what is the floor and ceiling for this super youth roster? Is Lowry still on board with the direction of the team? And how likely is a Lowry trade after the moves this summer?
Again, I don't think Lowry's more likely. I think Lowry's more likely in the sense that just the Jazz are so young. And again, I made the joke that, I get older, they stay the same age. That's the problem. The Jazz just keep getting younger, and they are gearing up for another top 5 pick next year.
Yep.
So they're adding another 19-year-old to the roster, and Lowry will then be 29. So in that sense, I do think it starts to solidify that Lowry will be gone at some point. I don't think it makes it more likely in the short term that it happens. In fact, I think it makes it less likely because they want somebody to score.
Yes.
Like you could really be the worst offensive team in league history if you don't have Lowry on this roster to just carry the burden. Mm-hmm. Scoring's hard in the NBA, and the Jazz don't have proven scorers outside of Lowry. So just having him carry the load will be beneficial. The floor is, would they win 17 games last year? I put it the same number. And the ceiling would be like 27. I think there's like a 10-game max there because the Jazz aren't going to let themselves get to 35 wins with these young players.
I was going to say 15 to 30. But going back to the Lowry trade and why I don't think it's less likely in the short term, even if Lowry isn't like this super vocal leader, like he's like, I think there's value to like Ace Bailey and Walter Clayton being like, there is a 7-foot behemoth of a man who makes 95% of his shots when we're practicing. Yeah. Like this is an NBA player. This is an all-star. Like this is what it looks like.
And you know what? Ace's future might be Lowry Markkanen.
Yeah.
He might be. We're talking about how good he is off the ball. Like, if at some point the shots don't go in at a high enough rate with his self-creation and he doesn't get to the rim well enough, because right now he doesn't, and I think it's more of a strength issue than a skill issue. But if the skill never develops and even if the strength does, and he can't get to the rim still, he's going to look a lot like Lowry, which is like a lot of threes on catch and shoot situations and a great athlete who can score in the open court but doesn't create a lot. And that's very possible that that's what Ace's future looks like. And it looks a lot like Lowry, and maybe getting that first year with him, watching how he plays, watching where he gets his shots, some of the tricks of being that tall and getting shots off. He's 4 inches shorter than Lowry, don't get me wrong, but that could be what his future looks like. So playing next to him might not be the worst thing.
Yeah. Next up from Nick T. The Jazz are clearly aiming for a top pick in next year's draft. Which top prospect is the best fit for the current roster? The 3 prospects, Darren Peterson, AJ DeBonsa, and Cam Boozer. Some people have said that there is 3 Cooper Flags in next year's draft, not like play style wise, but like prospect wise.
I would disagree. I think if Cooper had played this year, and we'll see. Mm-hmm. I mean, AJ DeBonsa just won MVP. At this FIBA U19 thing. Mm-hmm. It was actually like not that good. Yeah. He had 14 points and 4 assists a game, but he wasn't like if you put him on the US select team right now, he wasn't going to win the MVP the way Cooper Flag did last year. True. It was like, is he as good as Kevin Durant? Yeah. That AJ's not there. He's just not that developed. Cooper's one of the best one and done prospects we've ever seen. Yes. It was just exceptional last year. So I don't think we're going to get 3 of them. Yeah. And remember, at this point last year, people were talking about like Cooper, Nolan Traore. It's like he went 19th or 20th or whatever. Yes. You know what I mean? Like we always do this. We hype up some of these guys, and one of these guys is going to falling to 6 or 12 or whatever. And Cam's going to be great. Cam's just a very ready product. He's super polished. Mm-hmm. A lot of people think Darren Peterson's better than AJ DeBonsa is right now.
Yes.
So, best fit, I have no idea what these guys are going to look like. Positionally, probably Darren Peterson. Because the Jazz need a guard. Yeah. He is a 6'6" point guard in the mold of Shea. Mm-hmm. more athletic than Shea, not as athletic as Anthony Edwards, but like kind of that type of, twitchy, really crazy downhill stop on a dime, blur athlete who's got to continue to develop his shot. But, we'll see him at Kansas like. He gets to play BYU and A.J. DeBonsa. And then Cam Boozer's just like a true 4, but is like truly maybe the best high school player since Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. Like he wins everywhere he goes. He won championships. He's always the MVP. So we'll see. He could be like a 20-10 guy next year.
Yeah. So I will say if it is
at Duke, not in the NBA.
Yes.
Cam could be a 20-10 guy at Duke.
I will say if it is what they say and it ends up playing out like this is 3 number 1 pick level guys in one class, I would say any of them would take priority for the Jazz over anyone on the roster. Like I even think AJ DeBonsa would take priority over Ace Bailey.
Yeah, better prospect.
Yeah,
for sure.
But so like fit, maybe it doesn't really matter, but I would agree with you that it would be Darren Peterson just because the Jazz, to have a true creator, like Isaiah creates for other people, but having a person who can create for himself at the guard position would be massive.
Absolutely.
All right, next up from Jesse. Was surprised to see Ace starting in the 4 spot in Summer League Game 1. I get part of his appeal and his positional versatility, but what position do you see him being during the regular season? Saw a quote where his college coach called him a potential point guard.
That's wrong.
Yeah.
But he can maybe run some stuff eventually. He can't do it right now. He's not good enough to run it right now. But yeah, you could play him 2 through 4 conceivably at some point. Right now, physically, he can't handle 4. So he switched onto like Janai Broom, and like Janai's a man.
Yeah.
Like it was crazy to see him in person. He looked good. I think Janai Broom's going to make it. Like he's going to be an NBA player. But yeah, he's just like physically can't do that right now. So he's going to have to guard some 2s and 3s and just use his length and athleticism to be switchy on the perimeter. And I think he's going to be in real trouble when he plays against stronger guys in the paint defensively.
A lineup that I really want to see next year. The playmaking wouldn't be too great, but Keontae at the 1, Ace at the 2, Taylor at the 3, Lowry at the 4, Walker at the 5.
Yeah.
Just like a massive lineup.
Yeah.
A lot
and
of
maybe
creators.
Lowry's the 3 there.
Yeah.
But like that might be the starting lineup, except for I think it's going to be
Isaiah.
Kyle Filipowski at the 5. And then, I don't know who plays point guard, or at the 4, excuse me.
Yes.
But I think Lowry, Walker, Ace are probably starting, unless Ace just is really a fish out of water and just can't hang it all. But like Cody started last year. Remember, I think Cody started game 1 last year. And I just don't think Taylor's going to be, I think the Jazz are going to bring him along really slowly. So I'd put Flip there, and Flip has to be a 4. And Lowry's played some 3 in his life. So, and they're just, you're just standing in the corners or whatever. But that's kind of what I see happening. And then, you're going to be really switchy. And I think you're going to have Ace, who actually thought, like, I was watching specifically because you watch his game film at Rutgers, and like we talked about the 2K controller being unplugged. Like when his guy's in the corner, he's just not paying attention, his hands are down, he's just watching the ball. I actually thought his activity was really good defensively. He made mistakes, but I actually thought from an activity standpoint and awareness standpoint, he already looked more bought in.
Yes.
Which is a good sign.
From Todd Crow, would you have kept Collins and shot for the 5th worst record and tried to be good next year, or are we too good for that? I'd much rather do that than have no vets, trade Lowry, and wait 7 years for Ace and a 40% chance AJ to win. Why isn't next year's team good enough?
Well, again, it has a lot to do with the draft pick.
Yeah.
But also has a lot to do with how good the West is. Like, what move could the Jazz have made that would have gotten them close to the 11th best team in the West?
Yeah.
Like, again, I have said, I don't think the Jazz are actually as far away as people think, but that doesn't mean you're quote unquote knocking on the door.
Yeah.
But like, I mean, just off the top of my head, and I'll just try and go west to east, just in the Western Conference, but like Portland's a lot better than the Jazz. The Clippers are a lot better than the Jazz. The Lakers are a lot better than the Jazz. The Kings are a lot better than the Jazz. The Warriors are a lot better than the Jazz. The Suns, maybe not.
Yeah.
They're a bit of a mess. Denver's a lot better than the Jazz. Houston's a lot better than the Jazz.
San Antonio?
San Antonio's a lot better than the Jazz. Dallas is a lot better than the Jazz. And I think I might have just named 10 off the top of my head. Memphis is a lot better than the Jazz. Minnesota's a lot better than the Jazz. Like, New Orleans should be better than the Jazz and is making moves to win, and now has traded their unprotected first-round pick in 2026. They are betting that they have to be better than the Jazz next year, because if they're bad in the lottery, that could be the number 1 overall pick that goes to Atlanta for Derek Queen. Like, it was a horrible trade, but they are basically saying, like, we are jumping. We didn't check the parachute, but we think it's in there.
Yeah.
That's what they did. So they better be good next year. The Jazz don't have a pathway to being that good. And even with Collins on the team, John Collins, you could have won some more games if you just wanted to play him full out, but you're talking about 30 wins. So you're not making the playoffs in the West. meaning you're not doing anything reasonable on the court, and then you're just losing your draft pick.
Yeah.
So this trade opens up room to play the young guys, protects your draft pick, so it's not going to go to the Oklahoma City Thunder at all.
Mm-hmm.
So you made them take Derek Favors and pay his $30 million left, which I'm sure Danny Ainge gets a laugh out of, even though he didn't make that trade in the first place. And you don't have to artificially tank games in the middle of the year. You know, you get to play flip 35 minutes a night, and Taylor, as mentioned, he wants to play as much as he wants to play, and Cody the same way.
Yeah, and that's something that I just don't get. Like, there is really no benefit to being a middle-of-the-pack team, especially if you're in the lower end of the middle pack. Like, you're either, like, best case scenario, you make it to the play and make it out of the play, and then you're getting like bounced to the number 1 seed, right? Mm-hmm. And like, okay, cool, you got to host 2 playoff games. Fun. That was fun. Next year now, or like you're back at the 10th to 14th pick again, and you're missing out on Darren Pearson, AJ, and
yeah.
You know, like
I look at the teams right now. We just really quickly do this kind of in the offseason, and we'll do this more going into the year. But like, the Jazz aren't better than the Wizards right now.
No.
Like, the Wizards went out and added C.J. McCollum. They have Marcus Smart. They have Chris Middleton. They've got another draft pick. Alex Sarr's going into his second year. Bub Carrington's going into his second year. And, like, I don't know if those guys are great players, but C.J. wants to play. You got Jordan Poole off of your team, which is probably a negative. You know, it's addition by subtraction. Like, C.J., Marcus Smart, Alex Sarr is better than any trio the Jazz have right now. Charlotte, we don't know, but they went out and got Jordan Poole, who, again, maybe he's just such a negative, but they have to win.
Yeah.
So
Colin Sexton,
Zion, Herb Jones, or excuse me, no, I'm thinking New Orleans. Yeah. Charlotte has LaMelo, excuse me. Played for their G League team one time. LaMelo, Brandon Miller. See if Con can step in and play right away. Colin Sexton. They don't have a center at all, right? Do they? Yeah, they really need a center because they traded away Mark Williams and now Yusuf Nurkic to the Utah Jazz, so they've got to figure out what they're going to do there.
Oh, I think they signed Cody Zeller.
Okay, they don't have a center, like I said. So they'll have to figure that out, what their front court's going to look like. But they're right there with the Jazz. Yes. I would probably enter the season as they're probably the worst team with the Jazz. And even then, they've got just a little bit better, maybe a little more talent. New Orleans, we talked about, I was just mentioning there. You add Jordan Poole. You hope Zion comes back. You've got Herb Jones. You've got Trey Murphy. You hope some of those guys can step up and play a little bit. They have to because they don't own their draft picks, so there's no reason to be bad. Philly's obviously not going to be 24 wins bad this year. Brooklyn, maybe. Brooklyn has gotten worse. They drafted 5 point guards, which is weird. But they traded Cam Johnson for Michael Porter Jr. Like, I think Brooklyn's going to be in the running with the Jazz.
Yes.
But I think the 3 teams that are the worst teams right now on paper easily are the Jazz, the Hornets, and the Nets.
Yeah.
So we'll see how that goes. But yeah, the Jazz are going to be one of the 3 worst teams in the league next year. And by far the worst team in the West, right?
Yeah.
By far the worst team in the West. So
Whittle and Driley. That block by Ace had me salivating about his potential on defense. Do you guys see him becoming a strong 2-way threat? I think his potential as a defensive playmaker is higher than his potential as an actual like on-ball lockdown guy. But I think either way, he has potential there.
He covers a ton of ground.
Yes.
He really moves like laterally extremely quickly. And not just like I'm guarding the ball and I'm like keeping a guy from getting into the paint. Not that type of defense, but like his closeout stuff is really good. So he's going to block a lot of like threes and jump shots that'll just like turn into fast break opportunities because you block a jump shot, you should get a layup out of it. I think you will see some of that. I think he's going to be better as a weak side shot blocker. Honestly, sometimes this stuff, like, great, you made the play. Sometimes guys, is like with the Andre Kirilenko flaw, was like he would let guys get to the rim so he could block their shot, as opposed to just being like, well, if you stop them 18 feet away from the basket, make them pass. That's better because you've blown up the play. Ace is going to have to learn to do that. I don't blame him for not knowing how to do it at 18 years old. And guess what? Like I'm sure that's how he defended everyone in high school.
Yeah.
It's like drive, block your shot. Yeah. Drive, you know, like the way you were playing your little brother. You know, it's like, yeah, come on, watch this. Yeah, I'll make you feel like you're close. And it's easier for me because I only have to do one action instead of moving my feet for 5 seconds on the perimeter. But no, that's one of his draws. Like the physical tools are really, really high. And he bends at the waist in like a good way. I think he like wants to play defense. Again, we talked about the controller unplugging off the ball. I actually thought when he was on the ball at Rutgers, he was pretty dialed in and not good, but dialed in. And like you figure out those tools. And again, you start to look at the future of the Jazz and it's like, well, Taylor's going to be a good defensive player and Walker's a good defensive player. And I think Ace's physical tools are going to let him be a good defensive player. And I think Cody gets a lot of deflections already. I thought Cody was great in this game. So you just start to see the length on the perimeter. It's like, oh, that's intriguing. And then
Very.
you add AJ DiBonsa or Darren Peterson or Cam Boozer or whatever. It's like, okay, all of a sudden you've got like a really physically elite team. And those teams are generally pretty good defensively just because they're so long.
Something interesting, and you've talked about it, how like maybe the Jazz aren't as far away as they like may look. I think what they're really lacking is like the guy, and maybe you need two of them, right? But it's like with all of the length, and like they have good people who create for others, Isaiah Collier. They have people who can create their own shot, like Keontae. Like if you just add some star power, like it seems like they already have the supporting cast.
Yeah.
So it's like
all the pieces just need to fall into place.
Yes.
Sometimes it's just really hard to see what you actually have until the one or two positions of need are met, and then it's like, oh, that's where he fits.
Yes.
Oh, he is a good sixth man,
Yep.
or he is a good third player on a team, or this is his ideal role. And it's hard to know until you just have the guys.
Yeah.
So and look, you're betting as a front office that you can recognize it before it happens. That
Yes.
you can predict what the puzzle's going to look like with those pieces.
from William Hedrick. If Ace Bailey turns out to be the guy, what did the Jazz learn from the Donovan situation to try and keep it from happening again?
Coach him early. Ask him to do the hard things early. One of the things I've talked to some people from Atlanta who said this to me as well, which kind of enlightened me, was like, I wonder if Quinn had a hard time having hard conversations with players. I wonder if Quinn had a hard time asking his players to do things that they didn't want to do. Quinn really empowered players to do the things they were good at. Jordan
Yes.
Clarkson, Donovan Mitchell, Rudy Gobert, but maybe didn't get them to do the things they didn't want to do at a high level. So players like playing for him, but he also didn't challenge them. Like no one ever asked Donovan to play defense.
Yeah.
And Donovan said over and over, I'm here because I play defense, and never did. But, if Will Hardy can get through to Ace and say, like, off the ball, scoring, and defense is going to be where I want you to figure it out. And then we're going to reward you with on-ball creation, on-ball opportunities, crazy shots. That will be better for him in the long run. I actually think, because I don't think the off-the-court stuff, like, everyone's different. Every player's different. Remember, Donovan was going to barbecues and stuff, and it was, this guy's going to live here forever, and then things changed. And look, he didn't get along with Rudy, and there was the COVID issue, and all of this weird stuff happened that's not going to be the same experience that you end up getting with Ace Bailey. And also, Donovan's background is like New York. His dad worked with the Mets. Like, he was a big city guy in some respect. Ace Bailey came from Chattanooga, Tennessee, and went to Atlanta, which is a bigger city, but didn't even play at like the big city high schools, and then went and lived at Nothing, New Jersey to play at Rutgers. Right? Like it's Jersey, but like the city they play in is not this huge town. Yeah. So they're pretty different. But if he turns out to be the guy, I think the hope is that you've developed him to a better player younger.
Yes.
More so than like, how do you baby him off the court? I don't think that's what you're thinking about at all.
And another thing that I mentioned in last week's episode as well is that the new CBA is very team friendly. Yeah. Like when it gets to the Ace's second and even third contract, depending on if he makes all-star teams or whatever else, the Jazz can offer him tens of millions of dollars more than anybody else can.
Yeah. You look at the deal that Shea is getting right now.
$70 million a year.
And versus the deal that Luka's going to get with the Lakers. Like, Luka is getting a lot less money because he has been traded.
Yes.
Now, that was not up to him. He wanted to be in Dallas. But, when you move teams, you lose money in the current NBA.
Yeah.
So.
Next up, from Whit on Dryly, Walt's game looks better than Isaiah. Is it possible he takes over starting minutes at PG? I've also said this before. Last year, the Jazz had one of the top 3 most different starting lineups in the NBA, and I imagine that'll be the same because it's development, but it's also like testing how players look next to each other.
Don't confuse shot making with good play.
Yes.
That's one thing. Now, look, shot making matters. It's like what you're saying. It's the money ball. He gets on base. Like, he makes shots. That does matter. So I'm not dismissing what you're saying. Just like, what is your function? What's your actual job? Now, I said I loved Walt's reads. I loved how slow the game was for him. And he's like, he made some steals. He was a good defensive playmaker at Florida last year. And they had a lot of guys, big guys that were pretty good college players behind him, so he could gamble a lot. And he can probably get away with doing some gambling now with Walker Kessler behind him. I also wonder, with the Thunder playing the style of defense they did, if more teams are going to say, hey, let's just gamble and get a lot of steals. Yeah. And that's going to be the best defense we can create because it gives us really good offense because we get layups out of it. And the Jazz could use a lot of that easy offense if, especially, they're as bad offensively as we've talked about. Like, if you only have Lowry and Lowry can't create shots on his own, you got to create shots by generating turnovers. So maybe you'll allow him to keep gambling. But I just don't think he's quite there yet as a point guard. And
Yeah.
he didn't start. Isaiah started. Let's see if he gets a start at some point if Isaiah rests or whatever, and how he looks running the show. Because he might. Maybe he does. He looked pretty good at times as a point guard at Florida. And again, he started his career as a point guard at Iona, played quarterback and cornerback in college or in high school at football, and quarterbacks are the point guards of the team. And then went back to it his senior year, his junior year at Florida. He was kind of off the ball. So he's got experience as a point guard. He's just not like natural, Kyle Lowry point guard type of stuff.
And no matter even I'm not gonna say he never could be, but even with a year of development, I still think Isaiah Collier is gonna be the best passer on the Jazz team.
Yeah.
So next up, from Matthew Wheatley, a funny one. Can you explain to me, I'm 5 years old, what a trade exception is, and give an example, realistic or not, of what it could do before it expires next year?
Okay, so a trade exception, and this one's a little bit tricky. So a trade exception is a placeholder. It's just an IOU, essentially, right?
Yes.
It has value purely as a symbol of salary.
Yep.
So in the Jazz situation, it sounds like how they're going to structure the deal. It's actually it's a little funky. So when I originally saw it, I thought, the Jazz will get a $13 million trade exception back because it's the difference generated between the money outgoing and the money incoming.
Yeah.
So the Jazz have $13 million incoming, between $9 million for Kyle Anderson and $4 million for Kevin Love, but they're sending out $26.5 million. So 26.5 minus 13 is $13.5 million. I thought that was going to be their trade exception. Because the Jazz haven't used their mid-level exception, which is $15 million, I think 14.9, they can use that to pay Kevin Love and Kyle Anderson. So basically, they're using their mid-level exception to just take those guys into space.
Yes.
Which is, Jeremy Grant was traded into space for the Trailblazers 2 years ago from Detroit or whenever that deal was. If you have enough salary cap space, you don't have to send equal salaries back. And the Jazz have enough salary cap with their mid-level exception to basically just take these players without sending salary back, but they did send out John Collins.
Yes.
So long story short, you basically take those two players into your salary cap space, almost excluded entirely from the outgoing money from John Collins. So the Clippers give the Jazz a $26 million IOU for John Collins' salary.
Yeah.
That's just the placeholder to make this deal work. So the Jazz can now use that $26.5 million placeholder, IOU, whatever you want to call it, to make a trade to other teams in the NBA with it. It's not cash.
Yes.
But it operates essentially like cash, like a gift card or whatever, an IOU. And you can take that much salary back. And where that has value is a team that actually wants to shed $26 million because TPEs, traded player exceptions, don't count against the salary cap. Like the Jazz didn't take on $26 million in salary cap by trading John Collins. They got $26 million off. They can trade that to another team that wants to shed $26 million.
Yes.
So if there is a team that wants to get off of a salary, the Jazz can send this deal up to $26 million. It doesn't have to be the whole thing.
Yes.
But you can send it to them and get a player back without matching salaries. It counts as a salary match without actually a player or salary being involved.
It's basically like you're playing Monopoly. You don't get $26 million in actual Monopoly cash, but you pull a chance card that says you have $26 million that you can use in some other deal.
Yes, exactly right.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's probably the easiest way to explain it.
Yeah.
So that's how it works. If I'm being completely honest with you, I don't think the Jazz are going to use it.
Okay.
Teams usually don't.
Yeah.
There are a ton. Most teams around the NBA have traded player exceptions because they do these types of deals. And sometimes it's $3 million, sometimes it's $12 million, sometimes it's $26.5 million. Like a big one was just generated in the Kristaps Porzingis trade.
Yeah.
You know, like because $26 million came in and et cetera, moved out. So teams create these traded player exceptions. The Jazz did notoriously use theirs with Carlos Boozer. You know, they traded Boozer to the Bulls for whatever, $20 million at the time. And the Jazz turned around and used it to acquire Al Jefferson, you know. So that's how it can be used. But the Jazz, as we mentioned, are going to be one of the three worst teams in the NBA next season. Why bring on $26 million in salary? Just be cheap and bad.
Yeah.
And Austin Ainge has said this offseason, he said it in his debut press conference, that he thinks salary cap space is more valuable than expiring contracts. So unless some team was like, oh man, we are in salary cap hell, we're in terrible shape. We've got to unload $26 million or up to $26 million. And we are willing to give up several future first-round picks or an unprotected future first-round pick to get off of this guy's contract, and the Jazz could take that back now. That's where the value is, and the Jazz send the $26 million trade exception back, and that team gets under the salary cap. That's where it has value. But there's other teams out there who can do it. You know, it doesn't necessarily just have to be the Jazz to do that. And, the Nets are the king of this team, or the leaders in the clubhouse of these teams right now that have salary cap space to be able to take on deals and help facilitate trades. So there are also other things. You can't include players in trades with trade exceptions. So you can't match salaries that way, I don't believe. So it's tricky. My guess is it just expires.
Yes.
That would be my guess. But if, the right player comes along and the Jazz want to pay someone X amount of dollars and get a future first-round pick, they could.
Next up from Todd Crow, not necessarily a question, but a plan for next year. He says, develop the youth, practice some playoff-style ball, let Walker and Collier be aggressive offensively, and try to win every game within that paradigm. Got to think that still gets you the same top 5 pick odds, and if we drop to 7, so be it.
That's exactly what the Jazz are doing.
Yeah.
The Jazz are slightly saying we're not making the whole season about the pick, which is smart. Don't let that hang over everyone's head. That gets tricky and gets goofy, and then also it puts a lot of pressure on the next guy to come in and well, you guys gave up a season for me. It's no, you were the result of a bad season, not the cause. And I think, Ace Bailey's going to have to shoulder that. People are going to be all this for Ace Bailey? We already talked about it with Con Knippel. You lost 65 games for Con Knippel. And that's the question that the Hornets are having to answer right now. So you got to be a little bit careful with that. And I don't think the Jazz want that type of pressure on the next player that comes in. And also, they don't want players to think that the draft pick's more important than me. He's not even on the team. This is a hypothetical. So I think in that sense, you probably don't operate that way all season long. But I just think the Jazz also recognize their odds of having the 6th worst record in the NBA or better meaning not 1 through 5 worst records, but actually, the 8th best record or the 9th best record, or 22nd in this sense, what I'm saying. And actually giving up the pick is extremely low. So, don't worry about worst record at all costs. But they have also insulated themselves pretty well to know that they are not going to be at risk of giving up this draft pick, barring Ace is awesome or Keontae takes a huge leap and Bryce takes a huge leap, and all of a sudden it's okay, well, then you got something, and it's fine. But, no, I still think the Jazz are recognizing they want to keep this pick.
Next up from Stephen Q. Ritter. Best scenarios for using the John Collins trade exception, bring on a bad contract and draft capital, or grabbing a player from an apron team. Who might be targets for these scenarios? I think the best case scenario would be bringing in a young, promising player and or a draft asset.
Yeah. Probably a draft asset.
Yeah.
In all honesty, because Ace Bailey, Walt Clayton Jr., Bryce Sensabaugh, Keontae George, Taylor Hendricks, Cody Williams, Kyle Filipowski, Isaiah Collier. I think I just named 9 guys. How many young players do you want?
True.
Do you want Jonathan Kuminga to come onto this roster now and just be planted in the middle and be well, I want to get mine?
Yeah.
It's I think, and by the way, I got a question about this, and I just want to respond because I didn't know if Eddie was actually asking for a mailbag question or if he was just DMing me, because he DM'd me before I sent out a question today. I would have thought that John Collins, and I had floated this idea, for Jonathan Kuminga would have made a lot of sense, right? $26 million is probably a pretty good number for Jonathan Kuminga.
Yep.
The Warriors get somebody back in John Collins who can step in and help them right away. He's a better player than Quentin Post, but helps them win. They're veteran. He wants to play well because it's his contract year. I thought that would have made a lot of sense. Jazz don't have that opportunity anymore. But now, could you trade the traded player exception in a sign and trade? I guess conceptually you could, but I actually think it would have made more sense to just trade John Collins.
Yes.
Now, again, the Warriors are one of these teams, and they're actually under the cap, I think, for the first time in forever. But it is the type of team that may say, hey, we want to keep flexibility open. We want a $26 million IOU. We will trade you somebody for your traded player exception. That does have some value there. But, I think, honestly, more likely just get another pick from somebody if you can.
Yes.
For another team that's desperate to get off of salary. And you can step in and swing versus another young player. You just have so many, and you've handpicked these guys. You've drafted these guys. So continue to invest in them.
Next up from Clayton Searle. What's the minimum you'd take in a Lowry trade? Maybe something like this. For the record, I think the Jazz say no, but it's in the ballpark. The trade shows Lowry going to Detroit for Tobias Harris, Ron Holland, Simone Fontecchio coming back to town, and then a 26 and 28 first-round pick.
I would note that Simone's already been traded to the Miami Heat.
Yes.
So this, hypothetically would not work. Nor do I actually think the Pistons would do that. you've got a young player in Ron Holland, which again, how many young players do the Jazz need? And the Jazz would love to get 2 future firsts, but I think the Pistons want to hold on to some of their flexibility. Something like that, I get it, though. Yeah, a young player and some draft picks and expiring deals, even though I think Tobias still has some money left on his deal. I think something like that conceptually could make some sense. You know, and there's a chance the Jazz just look back a year and regret not trading Lowry for Brandon Podziemski and Jonathan Kuminga a year ago. And I don't know what all was on the table and what wasn't on the table and how close it actually got. I've heard it got close, but I've also heard it didn't get close. And that's just from different outlets, not necessarily anything I've heard directly. So I think you would love to get a good young player and draft picks back. I don't know if that's going to be on the table. I really don't know. It depends on how well he plays this year. Yeah. Right now at 19 million, or after 19 points a game and shooting in the low 30s or whatever, mid 30s from the 3-point line, low 40s from the floor, you probably wouldn't get that much back for him. But that's why I think you let him rebuild his value and then you move him out.
Next up from...
what would I take for him?
Yes.
I'm hungry, so like a sandwich, like a spicy chicken from any of our local establishments. Yeah.
Crown Burger gift card.
Yeah, whatever, yeah. Love a Junior Crown.
From Caleb Manser.
I'll give you a traded player exception back for a Junior Crown Burger and fries.
Are Kevin Love or Kyle Anderson going to stick around? I would think they get moved before the season starts. I agree with you that Kevin Love gets bought out. But I think that there's value to having like Kyle Anderson and Yusuf Nurkic on the team. Like sure, they're going to take a little bit of minutes, but like the only person who Yusuf is really going to take minutes from is Walker, if anyone. Like sure, Kyle might play some 5, but then Kyle Anderson, like he's maybe a 10 to 15 minute guy compared to John Collins, who's a 20 to 30, 35 minute guy.
Yeah, you gained minutes in this trade. Actually, you didn't lose minutes. Yeah, you gained minutes. So,
but no, and also just like I said earlier, from a leadership standpoint, I think Kyle Anderson will bring a lot to this team.
Yeah.
From Garth, now that Utah has dumped all of the vets, where does Utah look for leadership? Is Markkanen still in the long-term plan with all of the youngsters? Is Utah shifting to a more pass-oriented offense, picking up Nurkic and Anderson, or are they going to mostly sit the bench this year?
I think those guys mostly sit.
Yes.
You'll take their residual passing when they are on the court, and that'll help. And Nurk, we spoke to him last week, and he kind of said that. He said, I'm excited to pass to these young players. Like everyone says that, and he can do that, and so can Kyle Anderson. So, but you got to make sure you're passing to people. Sometimes it's better if those guys, being veterans, can score a little bit, because the Jazz probably need guys who are just willing to take shots. But it would be nice if somebody would alleviate the pressure off of a Keontae George. The hard part is Keontae's still going to be asked to carry a big offensive load, and I think it's been overly burdensome on him, and it's hurt some of his efficiency, where if maybe you just let him get some better shots, he might look like a better player.
Yeah. So. All right, I believe the last question here from Connor Morris. To me, it seems more likely the Jazz use the trade exception for another team unloading a player on them plus compensation rather than getting a starting caliber player, but does that depend on how Ace does this year? Is the reason they made the Collins trade just flexibility?
Mostly flexibility.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think so. And to lose games.
Flexibility, losing games, and also more minutes for the forwards.
Yeah. It's a win-win-win in that sense. The bad part is you didn't get good value for a good player. John played really well last year, and you didn't get appropriate value back as far as player for player, one for one. But you got down the line value for him, and then if you use the traded player exception, you got something extra.
I'm not saying that John Collins wasn't awesome last year and that he doesn't look good. He didn't look better last year than compared to a year or 2 years ago. But the Jazz traded for him for a veteran and a second-round pick.
A heavily protected second-round pick, like a designed pick that will never get conveyed.
Yes, and they traded him for 2 vets and a second-round pick.
Yeah.
I'm not saying, like I said, he played up, definitely. But I also, like we have talked about many times, I don't think there's much of a market for the Collins, Sexton, John Collins starter plus level players.
Right. You would have loved to have gotten a first-round pick for either one of those players. Inevitably, when you trade Lowry, I think you will make up some of that value if you recognize Colin Sexton came back with all the draft picks and Lowry in the Donovan Mitchell trade. So when you eventually trade Lowry or whatever, that's when you can grade, what did the Jazz actually get for Donovan Mitchell, and that's still down the line. Yeah, John Collins, you gave up Rudy Gay, who was the worst player in the NBA when the Jazz traded him. And look, I don't have to pay his bills, but the Jazz had to pay $17 million, $19 million extra to have John Collins on the roster the first year, and then even more the second year, the full $25 million or whatever it was last season. Ryan Smith paid nearly $50 million more for what ended up being Kyle Anderson, Kevin Love, and a second-round pick.
Yeah.
It was pricey, but that's not my money. I don't care. Again, I like chicken sandwiches. That's what I want right now. So it doesn't bother me at all. And if Ryan Smith's okay signing that check, I mean, he makes money back. The team's worth twice what he bought it for already. Good for him. I don't care.
Yeah.
So in that sense, it's not like the Jazz lost anything for John Collins. And look, his value was more today than it was after last year because he was terrible his first season in Utah. That was a horrendous trade after year one because John looked not borderline unplayable, but you couldn't play him with Walker. And the Jazz were going to bring John Collins off the bench all of last season. That was the plan going into the year. And Taylor Hendricks' leg breaks in half 3 games in, and John Collins has to start.
Yes.
So they actually kind of ended up in a better spot, and they ended up saving $13 million this year off of what they thought they were trading. So I'm sure that's how they look at it as a bit of a victory today.
Yeah, and something that I will say, and this is not coming from anywhere, this is just from me seeing what I see watching the NBA and all the moves that are made and such. I don't think this was like a Chicago Bulls situation where they were offered a first-round pick for Caruso, waited, and then had to trade him for Josh Giddey. This wasn't a missed out on an offer thing. I don't think there was ever a crazy offer on the table for Colin Sexton or John Collins, and I think that it finally just came to the time where okay, we have a new president of basketball ops. We are switching directions. We are going full young. We're not throwing out these injury reports. We're getting rid of these guys. It's time.
Yeah.
So
I think you're right. I don't think there was ever enormous market value for these guys. Maybe some point for Colin, but you look at some of the trades that were done around the offseason. It's just Dennis Schroeder for KJ Martin in a second round pick. It's just there's just not crazy value. Dennis Schroeder's a good player.
Yeah.
But you got KJ Martin, who I don't think he's going to be on the Jazz next year. And Jazz waive him and save another $8 million.
Yes.
Be bad and be cheap and be flexible, and you can cut $21 million off of your salaries next year by waiving KJ Martin, who's got $8 million owed to him on non-guaranteed, and you've already saved $13 million from John.
Yes.
You save money. You can be cheap and you can be flexible, and then if you need to make financial moves to take on players or take on contracts and draft picks, you can. And even then, I just wonder if that's not where the Jazz are anymore, and they're just saying, let's just focus internally. Let's stop trying to be cute on the perimeter of the fringes of how to win all these trades. Just focus. Just kind of dial in, narrow it down, focus on the court. And if there's little things here and there, you can, but don't make that your main priority.
Yes.
All right. That'll do it for this show. Thanks to everybody who listened. Find us on Twitter at Ben's Hoops, see Holt Sports, same place at Blue Sky. Read us at KSLSports.com. We will be back again next week, recapping the conclusion of the Salt Lake City Summer League, and we will have, game tonight, game Tuesday, game Friday, game Sunday. So we'll have four more
games.
Summer League games.
Wow.
Before we talk next time. And probably not any more moves. Jazz are probably close to done, minus some waiver stuff. They've got to figure out what they're going to do with John Tonji's contract.
Yep.
I kind of think now, I don't know, we'll see. We'll see how they fill out the rest of this roster. I kind of think John Tonji's could get the last two-way deal.
Okay.
But I could be wrong.
Yeah.
Too bad we haven't seen him or RJ Lewis yet.
Yes.
Injuries keeping them out. They won't play tonight either. We'll be back with you again next week. Thanks for tuning in on YouTube and wherever you get your podcast.